Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's trouble at the airport when I put George Seaton's Airport against Renny Harlin's Die Hard 2, Die Harder. And as you can tell, this is a very festive round of the 70s versus the 90s. You know, both like Die Hard 2 may be more of a Christmas theme, but Airport definitely has plenty of snow. So let's just dive right on into this holiday fueled round or matchup. First up, we have George Seaton's Airport, starring a magnificent cast. You've got Burt Lancaster, George Kennedy, Jacqueline Bisset, Gene Seberg, Helen Hayes, and Van Heflin. And on top of a bevy of other character actors that pop up from around this time. But the film itself, of course, as you couldn't tell from the title, takes place in an airport. And there's like one of the worst snowstorms to ever hit Lincoln Airport in Chicago. I don't know if that's a fucking real airport. You can fact check me on that. That's what the comment section is for. But it's this airport in Chicago. They're getting the worst snowstorm they've had in like 6 years. And of course, Burt Lancaster is the guy that like runs the airport. You know, he's in charge of cleaning up all the messes. And like, of course, he's having marital problems. The film itself is like trope city. There's drama on drama on drama. But it's very well done, very well written. And the characters are very well done. Like they're real ass characters. I think I also forgot to mention Dean Martin is in this as well. He plays a pilot and who's also the brother-in-law of Burt Lancaster. And there's a great scene in they have a couple of great scenes because they clearly do not like each other. And of course, not to mention Burt Lancaster's having marital problems, but he can't leave because he's got an emergency on his hands. He's got to call in Petroni, brilliantly played by George Kennedy, who's on his night off. He's trying to get some from his wife. Kids are off at the fucking in-laws house and they're ready to roll, but they don't call him emergencies. They call him Petronis because this guy's the only motherfucker that can fix this shit. And on top of that, clearly Burt Lancaster has something going on with one of his co-workers, Gene Seberg, who's in charge of all like the legal shit and, you know, kind of the manager, so to speak, of the airport. And you also got her biggest conflict though is dealing with this stowaway, this elderly lady played beautifully by Helen Hayes. You know, it's one of those things where it's like you can't trust too many old ladies and stuff because they're, you know, they may smile and seem sweet, but they got a lot of nefarious plans going on. And then, of course, the biggest drama comes up when Van Heflin is his character. He's going to get on this plane to Rome, which Dean Martin's the pilot of, and he's also got a little drama going with the stewardess played by the lovely Jacqueline Bisset. And for a film, this film came out in 1970, and it's done in the classical style of filmmaking that like these actors like Dean Martin and Burt Lancaster and even Van Heflin and Helen Hayes were used to. But you also see kind of the newer generation, like with Jacqueline Bisset and Gene Seberg, you know, kind of the one, like especially Gene Seberg, who, you know, is in one of the most influential French New Wave films. Of course, she had been in all of this, was kind of basically a job for her. But the beautiful thing about Gene Seberg is she's such a good actor. It didn't matter if she was in some art house French film or if she was in just this basic popcorn fare. You know, Otto Preminger really like fucking made her an actor, you know, through Terror, whatever the fuck, but an actor nonetheless. And that's one thing about it. Like, this film is like, it's drama on drama on drama, but these actors are like, and George Seaton is just a journeyman director, but he has a way of making this movie, like, I wouldn't say it necessarily moves like a bullet. You know, it is kind of slowly paced. Like I said, it's done in the classical style of the old Hollywood, but also has a mixture of that cynicism that would be synonymous with the new Hollywood. And because, you know, it also deals with some heavy subjects, like Jacqueline Bisset's character is pregnant by Dean Martin, who's, you know, also married to another woman and who's the fucking sister of Burt Lancaster's character. And, you know, we deal with that. But Van Heflin's character's got a bomb. He's ready to explode that shit on the plane. You know, I bet that Helen Hayes' character never does that stowaway shit again, you know, because it's kind of, everything's just set up perfectly. And it, like I said, the drama just builds and builds. And it's very, because like once that bomb goes off, because it was that moment of that transitional period from old to new Hollywood, where like, even though this is done in the classical style, Like not even Dean Martin's like smooth talking ass can fucking stop Van Heflin from pulling that fucking cord and blowing that motherfucker up. But they're able to land the plane safely. Jacqueline Bisset gets blown, almost dies, but makes it. Kind of her squeezing the hand. In a very devastating scene where like Dean Martin's like doting over the injured Jacqueline Bisset while his wife's in the background. Wanting to know that he's okay, but he's more focused on her. And like Burt Lancaster's wife tells him she wants a divorce, and it's like that kind of clears the way for him to pursue Gene Seberg, and they run off together at the end of the movie. And like George Kennedy gets his box of cigars and he gets the fuck out of there because he's got to dig out a plane that's fucking stuck in the snow because everybody thinks they know more than the guy that knows shit. And it's just everybody in this movie is a shining star. Like Dean Martin, I would say he's definitely a better singer than he is an actor, but he was a very capable actor for the stuff that they put him in as well. Like Burt Lancaster too is the man. Like the worst thing about Burt Lancaster is what the fuck is up with that hair? Like could we not get that man a comb or some shit? Like almost every movie he's in, they got them hairs going every which way but fucking loose. And Gene Seberg, Jacqueline Bisset, and especially George Kennedy. George Kennedy kind of steals the show every moment that he's in this movie. And so this is a kind of a treat, definitely like fucking set off all of the fucking like disaster movies of the 70s because this one was such a big hit in 1970. Then we move forward to Renny Harlin's Die Hard 2 Die Harder, which of course is the sequel to the Christmas classic Die Hard, originally directed by John McTiernan. Here, Renny Harlin takes the reins. This was the second time he would tackle a sequel. Of course, one of his earlier films was Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And Die Hard 2, Die Harder is not as good as Nightmare on Elm Street 4, nor the original Die Hard, but it does have its moments. Of course, Bruce Willis returns as the character John McClane, and now he's in an airport in Washington, D.C., and he's waiting on his wife to arrive, and it's Christmas again. And, the McClanes can't seem to catch a break on Christmas. There's certainly a lot of jokes made about that, low-key little tongue-in-cheek digs at the first movie. But now it's, instead of terrorists holding up a fucking the Nakatomi Plaza in the fucking for a Christmas party, it's William Sadler, who is one of the greatest character actors of all time. He definitely chews up the scenery brilliantly. But now he's a colonel, and he's trying to break out this general played by Franco Nero, who's like, they're getting him because he's like some kind of drug lord as well, but William Sadler wants to break him out because, he's fighting the commies and shit. So kind of a lame story in and of itself, but I will say this, they do up the ante when it comes to the action in the film. There's a lot of like grand spectacle. Of course, Renny Harlin was really good at directing action, and, some of the shootouts I think are a lot better than the first one, but they once they start dealing with the plane shit, then it kind of gets a little dumb. And of course, Dennis Franz is like, he's a fucking cartoon character in this, man. Because like nobody believes John McClane. Of course, after the bullshit that happened in the first movie, he's now like a celebrity, and everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm just a hero over here. Same old bullshit that we've seen in a million of these fucking movies. Another thing too that you see in a lot of these movies of like the late 80s and early 90s were kind of the low key dig on whatever competitor fucking franchise was going at the time, because like when you first see Bonnie Bedelia, who plays John McClane's wife in the film, Holly, and which is kind of Holly Christmas, whatever the fuck, ooh, clever. Anyways, but the old lady sitting next to her is reading a magazine, and you see a picture of Lethal Weapon 2, which had come out the previous year, which was probably out when they were filming this movie. Of course, Lethal Weapon 2 came out in 1989. And Die Hard 2 came out in 1990. And of course, William Atherton returns as that douche nugget news reporter, and he's on the same plane as Bonnie Bedelia. And basically what William Sadler and his crew of fucktards do, which a bevy of character actors, Robert Patrick's in this, and Meat from Porky's, and I think John Leguizamo is in it. I could be mistaken on that one, but it is a dude that looks a lot like a young John Leguizamo, if I'm wrong. But they basically hijack an airport so they can get Franco Nero's character out of the country, and all of them. So John Amos pops up, and a lot of this shit you can see coming a mile away, especially like John Amos being a part of William Sadler's crew, because as soon as that motherfucker says, well, I taught him everything he knows, and where Airport may be trope city, fucking goddamn fucking Die Hard 2 is like cliche on cliche on cliche type shit. So and everything kind of works out. Of course, there are some magnificent explosions. You know, Renny Harlin is kind of like your fucking, kind of like fucking music video Michael Bay, so to speak. You know, and granted, he came before Michael Bay, but they all kind of fall in the same camp. They're very good at directing action, but the acting in this movie is below mid, especially compared to something like Airport. So I mean, this round clearly has to go to Airport because one, it's a real ass movie. Two, the acting is way fucking better, and three, the writing is far more better than fucking Die Hard 2. Because like I said, you know, how many fucking jokes can we make about the first movie? And it's very typical of sequels where you could just make a real ass sequel instead of like worrying about, you know, playing off on all the fucking like the what it all the fucking nostalgia from the first one because it was a big hit and shit. So for anybody keeping score, that is 58 to 47. 70s are up by 11 again. You know, it's up and down. Like that gap continues to fucking grow. The 90s come back for maybe one or two, but then the 70s, you know, just rolls like this. Because the thing about it is, specifically with Airport, it was a perfect mixture of that old and new Hollywood style that some people could craft, and it seemed to me like the journeymen were the best ones to actually capture that essence of that perfect balance of cynicism and, you know, morals and shit. Because of course, you know, the everybody kind of gets theirs that does like wrong shit, and you know, so if I said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. 58 to 47, 70s up by 11. I mean, they continue to hold their own. You know, like I said, the 90s come back with a few 1-2 punches, but you really can't fuck with the 70s because like even their like popcorn flicks were better than most fucking shit. Because also there is a testament when you compare these two movies, you kind of see how dumber we've gotten over the years. And like, mind you, from the 70s to the 90s there was a sharp decline in intelligence, and so just imagine the 90s between now, we're even fucking dumber. The world may be fucked, but all I know is I'm doing this real self-indulgent journey of which is better, the 70s or the 90s, like it really matters. But it's Christmas. Enjoy. 58 to 47. Have a holly jolly Christmas.